And then, you know, okay. Will I continue? Yeah, so I just think that it's a long road, and from a commission proposal to getting a final result, but then you're dealing with 7 political groups, and then in the council you're dealing with 27 member states, different countries, and the commission. So at the end of the day, everybody gets, not everybody is happy. They say that's a good outcome. Everybody's not, if you're 100% happy, somebody's very, very upset. So trying to get to a compromise position. So that's why we ended up where we were. But the beginning, I suppose the interesting thing was the reaction you get from industry and from civil society groups about the proposal and what they do. So they come to the council members, the member states individually, like in our case in Ireland, that go there, even though we didn't have much input from the government side, I think, really. And they come then to the member states or to the members of the group of the committee, and how they see. So that's the process, which takes a long time, and this is in the end it can be like the little things we can bring it down, and then the bigger things get through. So, are you familiar with the whole proposal, or how do we want to proceed?
Not through and through. I was reading up as much as I could since last Friday, so just trying to get a good idea of it. But it's super exciting, for sure. I think we have 45 minutes now set aside, and we have 4 questions from different people attending today. You're happy to answer, Torlach or Deirdre, any question you like. It's like this, take as long as you like.
Explain to people who weren't at the beginning. Torlach was involved very much in the technical side, but yeah, I didn't get to explain. So I turned up the political. We didn't have 800 hours of political meetings, but we had 800 hours of technical meetings, and needed an awful lot of, I'd say, of research on it. And
I think we started working on the proposal actually before it was made. We started working on it. March 2020, April 2020.
We had a report that yeah.
So we've been working on it now for a long time, this mandate. So this is now the results, and it's on to implementation and enforcement. So this is
yeah, exactly. One of the things that came up was like ChatGPT or large language models, all that area. Generative AI didn't exist when the commission initially proposed it. It didn't exist when the council had prepared their position, but did exist last November, 12 months when we were right in the middle of our deliberations. So we felt we had to put a proposal in there of some shape in order to keep it, to move forward to the trialogue position, so it could be discussed there. We could have a European approach to the whole area, whether it's and it's open-ended, not open-ended, but it's can be revised to delegated acts, the criteria and the requirements as the technology evolves. So that was part of it as well. So how do we want to move forward, Caelan, or do we want to?
I just have an opening question and then 3 remaining questions. So just myself and Niall Murphy, who's the co-founder and CEO, Curvilla George, who's here today, is a PhD student in AI in Trinity, and then Alan Coyne as well, a lecturer in UC Professional Academy in AI. So a good kind of rounded bunch of questions. So I suppose my opening question would be, as Shadow Rapporteur, what amendments did you yourself put through the AI Act? What were the considerations or concerns of your colleagues in EPP that you were most surprised with, concerns you'd considered before? And when does the legislation take effect? And do you foresee it changing as the new technology develops? And if so, would this represent a loosening of that legislation in your eyes, or a doubling down of it?
Okay, all right. There's a lot. Well, maybe we start with the amendments. As I said, when the commission proposal was produced first, we had a lot of reaction from industry, mostly I would say. And the number one thing was the definition of what AI was, and trying to come up with solutions. They felt that the definition from the commission would have included regular software, and didn't want to go that far, want to keep it purely on AI. So we put forward an amendment that was in line with the OEC definition, in order so that would give kind of international certainty, and for those that are trading or developing or selling into the EU or selling out of the EU, that there would be we know everybody would know where we stood. So that actually ended up being more or less the final outcome as well. I don't think the council had it at the time, had they?
No, the council went for a slightly different definition because just in the idea of having, so we went, the OECD was more or less a pure focus on machine learning techniques, and the idea of the council and also now later by the parliament was to include the notion of hybrid systems. So we had, whereas we had simpler techniques mixed with machine learning techniques, and this is what gave rise to the Dutch benefit scandal, for example, whereas that was a rather crude system that wouldn't have otherwise been covered by the requirements of the Act. So that's where we had to be a bit flexible, and yeah, we worked throughout the years closely actually with the colleagues in the OECD and also in NIST in the States, so that actually the definition of the OECD definition was largely informed then by the work of the Parliament, because they came with a new definition midway through the negotiations that also was adopted by NIST in the United States. So we felt that we were quite, it was probably one of the biggest achievements for the political group, where we have, full international alignment, and also we've quite a targeted regulation, so we are just maintaining the focus on the riskiest
so that was
technologies.
Yeah, I'd say from a general point of view, from an EPP point of view, from our point, and our office point of view, was to make it, well, to looking at it in development and to encourage that, and not to have it bogged down with unclear requirements or additional requirements. But we're going to have that anyway in the legislation. But the definition was one, and also what was it? The sectoral legislation, individual sectoral legislation. If there's legislation already in place, that would be recognised, and that's now clearly in Annex 2. Is this
2A and 2B?
2A and 2B of the existing sectoral legislation. That if you wouldn't have to comply with both, and recognising that, if say medical device is one area that was used, that sectoral legislation already exists, and you don't have just a single conformity assessment would be required then. So that was important. The other area too was in Article 6, which is the high risk definition of high risk. We again, from consultation with industry, introduced a filter, whereby, say, if you're developing in the education area, it doesn't include everything in education, so you can decide, well, I'm just developing a timetable, say, or something that will produce a timetable for an institution. But that's not really a risk to the health, safety, or the fundamental rights of an individual. So it's in education, but it's to try and get some sort of common sense approach that you can use your own judgment, but subject to notifying that this is what you're doing. So I think there was a broad thrust of we accepted, and we were in support of the Commission's proposal as the high risk approach, prohibited risk, prohibited, high risk, medium risk, and low risk. We were accepted on that, and as a way to approach the whole the development of the Act, because it's a joint, from our point of view, it was a joint approach by the Civil Liberties Committee on Civil Liberties, and as well as the Internal Market Committee as well. So it wasn't an industry-based approach; it was a joint approach, which I think ended up serving us well, because we had originally had Parliament opinions, a discussion as to what would they want to see in this Act, and it was always about trustworthy AI, human-centric approach, and that was important with it all, to give confidence to individuals, people, that if you're operating AI, if you're using AI, if AI is being used on you or making decisions about you, that there was some level of oversight. So I think that was important there. The amendments. What surprised? Were we surprised at anything from EPP? I don't think so. No.
Not particularly. No.
I think we have been very well familiar. The area of biometric identification, there was a strong point for the EPP. We wanted to have that in public places, particularly it is prohibited. But it was prohibited by the Commission. We agreed with that, and they had proposed certain exemptions in the areas of child protection, child kidnapping, terrorist attack, and serious crime. And we, as a group, supported that and wanted it to be available, subject to judicial oversight. And that was not supported by the Parliament originally. and eventually it ended up in the end through trial out position. It had to be, I wouldn't say abandoned, but it was more restrictions put in place. So trying to safeguards, to try and bring, the idea is compromise, bring people, get them something that they can vote for is important. So that was, I don't think there was anything of surprise from the EPP. They were very, very, there was maybe divisions in the EPP, something we didn't need this, absolutely didn't need this legislation. Didn't need it because we didn't want to be, and I know that maybe reflected some of your questions too, didn't want to be seen on the back foot that Europe, we should encourage this innovation in Europe, that other areas were racing ahead. But I think there was a strong majority, both in our group and in the Parliament, for having some form of oversight or legislation in this area. So I missed another question that you had there. Oh yeah, how does it come into force? When it comes into force, it'll come into effect. Well, there's various timescales. I mean, it's been agreed now, so it's probably 2 months after that. It's in the journal, isn't it?
Yeah, so we have what's called a corrigendum procedure next month. That's just correcting some linguistic issues with the text, and then about usually 15 to 20 days subsequent, it enters into the official journal, and then it enters into force from that date. And it depends on what aspect of the act we're talking about. So the prohibitions, for example, are 6 months from the entry into force, and then the code of practice for foundation models, so-called foundation models or large language models, that needs to be ready to go in 12 months' time. And then Annex 3, any high-risk uses, they have to comply with the requirements in 24 months' time. And then Annex 2A and 2B, which are the already regulated sectors, for example, automotive or medical devices, they have actually got 36 months to meet compliance. So there's a lot of work. I think there's 65 deliverables in the first year alone for the European Commission in terms of enforcement. So there's a lot of work on guidelines and the work continues in order to get it up and running. Each member state, of course, also has to nominate a regulator.
We're not sure whether that'll be in Ireland, probably Commission them on, but we haven't heard. And the Commission has started developing or setting up the AI office, the Artificial Intelligence Office, within the Commission, and that'll be responsible for liaison and well, they're actually in the process of recruiting.
Yes. So if any of you are graduating in the next 6 months and are understand the technical elements of the technology and would like to apply, I would encourage you to do so before the end of the month, I believe. So.
And don't think that this is very real. They're really looking for people of interest who understand, and they want to just create and understand in their own in-house knowledge to working with industry too. I mean, I think one of the interesting things about this legislation is that it's and again maybe we have it too with the DSA, the DMA, that it's not like a regulation at arm's length. It's working with industry as well, and there'll be stakeholders will be involved to advise, and there's an advisory board. They'll be able to, you'll be able to reach out and to commission to get advice and to get support in how you navigate this regulation. So, and then as it develops and as AI development, as it changes and it's changing as we speak, I know. It's hoped that it is proposed through delegated acts that the requirements can change, and so to keep it open-ended, future-proofed, not open-ended because that means that it's future-proofed and there is provisions to update. But I think the engagement with developers and with industry and with the outside world, as we would say, outside the bubble here, will be very important in this. Anything to add on that one? Do we miss anything? No? Probably.
Oh yeah, does it represent a loosening of legislation? Well, I mean, it couldn't be. I mean, it's the first proposal of its kind to be adopted in law globally. So I think it's a first attempt at regulating a fast-moving technology, and I think it's a fairly novel regulatory approach. So like it's really not the same at all as, for example, the GDPR. The GDPR is something completely in terms of compliance and in terms of requirements. I mean, GDPR just simply tried to regulate every type of data processing. Whereas here we have this little bit of it's about digital rights, a little bit it's about product safety, a little bit about consumer protection. It's also a little bit about innovation promotion insofar as how much you can actually do that by regulation. And the reason for that was because we're just focusing on one technology class and the use of the technology, but not every use is covered by the AI Act. So it's got a lot of scope for further, there'll be a lot of things that say, I think, further proposals in years to come, maybe on copyright, IP protected content, for example, or there might be something on liability will definitely be forthcoming.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't think it's going to stay the same forever, but it's a good start.
Mm-hmm.
The next question would be from Niall Murphy, co-founder and CEO of Stanza. His question is, AI safety is of critical importance for a spectrum of reasons, from social cohesion to continued existence. It could be argued the EU AI Act is the beginning of tackling the social cohesion angle, but given most of development of AI takes place outside of the EU, addressing real safety worries is unfortunately mostly outside of EU scope. What would you say in response?
Well, yeah, I suppose I said in response, but this is an EU this if you want to provide or to develop something for use within the EU, you have to develop to those standards. And those that if you're developing or if there's a deployer within the EU, they have to be aware of what they're using, and it has to be in compliance with the regulations. So I would see this a little bit in line of the Brussels effect, because these are the requirements that we have, and it is the biggest market, consumer market, well, in the world at the moment. So, if you want to provide your services, your product outside of the EU, you have to develop those standards. You have to be aware of the regulation. That's the same with anything. I mean, we had the same argument with GDPR as well, the data protection regulation. We've seen this term as well, Digital Marketing Act, Digital Services Act. Very conscious of it, but it clearly says that this regulation applies to anybody who's providing or was to provide a product or deploying a product from outside the EU. These are the requirements. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
I think it's also important to remember that the very real safety concerns around AI. I mean, there's a lot of talk about the notion of an existential threat, or is that all hype, or this is a quite a broader discussion, also quite long-termist. But the very real safety concerns have been where AI systems have been used to make decisions as close to the citizen as possible, and these are by simply a question of an unfair bias is something that can be immediately regulated and addressed. And nobody is going to use or buy these things if they're not working. So I think the fact we just had a meeting today with our counterparts from the US Congress and Senate who are working on AI policy, and I mean they're developing a white paper for release at the end of the month, and it is basically 90% similar to what we've done. So I think the core ideas are going to be prevalent globally. I mean, obviously, when it comes some bigger questions about how much sanctions do you want to, how much of a stick do you want to have on the developers? Yeah, okay, this differs by jurisdiction, but generally speaking, everybody agrees that we haven't had a single company complain that they have to meet requirements around fairness, transparency, or robustness or accuracy or anything like this.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is you see that the talk on the TTC, the Trade Technology Council, the G7 moving, and of course the safety what was it they called it in the UK that they had at the end of November last year, October.
AI
Safety Summit. So it's moving internationally, and unless we have to do this, it has to happen internationally. So we're very conscious that I know we were out there first with something, but it's not with this. We don't do it. As a point to keep everybody else down. We're hoping that this will be a standard that we can move and engage internationally with others. I think that's a clear thinking of the Commission as well. You can see they're moving it in that way.
Good. The next question is from Kervin Deirdre. Are you concerned that we are introducing regulations regarding AI at too early a stage, and that the EU introducing legislation before other large nations, namely China and the US, will hinder our own companies and public services and give these other countries a competitive advantage?
And yeah, I would say that that was a consideration, absolutely. That we're moving ahead, and that but for all the reasons that we spoke of, I mean, the EU has a different approach. Maybe we're conscious that we're not ahead of the curve where all the major development has come from, AI has come from the US. But in conjunction with that, the Commission has provided a lot of funding to try and encourage AI innovation. This is part of the whole strategy. The regulation is one part, but AI encouraging innovation as well, and having an AI support system in place, that's there as well. But I would think this is, like you mentioned, the question mentions public services. I mean, this is seen as giving better quality public service if they're using AI. Torlach mentioned the situation in the Netherlands whereby parents getting child benefit. There was unfair bias, and I mean that was because the algorithm used to make the decision was unfair. It was built-in biases. So we would hope that this would make it better quality public services. And again, I would say give confidence to citizens and people in the EU that if AI is being used to make decisions about them, whether it's a job application, whether they're entitled to housing or entitled to payment benefits, that there will be there's more oversight about the data and how the system was built, more transparency, and there is a regulator involved that's in their court.
And I think that the first mover argument is an interesting one, but I mean you can also simply say, well, what are the chances of, even if they wanted to, what are the chances of the United States passing a piece of legislation at the moment? Can they? They really struggle to pass legislation. So even if they have the will and the desire to do so, it's not always obvious politically that they can make it happen. And also, when we look at competitive advantage or whatnot, it took us 17 years to make a proposal on large social media companies, and in the meantime, there isn't a European one. So I don't necessarily believe that has a huge bearing on how we approach the digital world.
Very good. I think in your research as well, working on this legislation, what do you see from a product point of view that you think would be most useful to public services in Europe? What are you most excited about? That's actually not on the question sheet. Sorry, that's just a bit of a follow-up.
I'm most excited about the fairness that's there now, in terms of public service, in terms of education, access to education, in terms of providing, as I say, how social times. I think in the whole medical area, it's really exciting, the benefits of it. And yet, because you have it identified as it's a high-risk area, therefore that means you share how your product was developed, you share data, there's transparency. I mean, obviously respecting confidentiality, commercial confidentiality as well, but that there is a level of oversight. So this is good. This is a good thing. We don't, and I mean, then there's an enormous benefits and potential in the whole medical area, treatment, cancer, diagnosis. I mean, we saw it in COVID vaccine. I don't think we'd have had a vaccine as quickly as we did. Who'd have thought within whatever the short period of time there's a vaccine that was developed, and AI helped there. So there's enormous potential, but at the same time, there's so much questions and so much alarming, alarming reports out there about how this can go horribly wrong. You need to have public confidence. You need to build that consumer confidence, public confidence, citizens' confidence. I think that's really important.
Yeah, like even in that space, I mean, it's important to also remember, like, relative to other product safety like pieces of legislation, the requirements are these are not foreign to companies. The obligation to do a third-party conformity assessment and get a CE marking and go through all that process it's for Siemens, for Bosch, anything like this. This is their bread and butter. They do this week in, week out for other product lines. And the notion in medical is interesting because it's long been debated: can software even be considered a medical device? But of course, health solutions have been offered in the software space, and it's not always obvious how to bring them to market in a safe and fair manner. So I think it also offers extra avenues for innovation here that weren't necessarily there before.
Yeah, that's another point. Yeah, that we've been. I meant to bring. I've thought of that earlier on about innovation, and it's going to stifle innovation. In fact, we think, given the single market, it actually gives certainty to businesses. This is what's required. And if you're a small startup or small company developing, you develop to these standards, and you can sell or provide your product anywhere in the European Union. That's what the single market is about. So it's a harmonisation legislation, piece of legislation as well, and that's really important. It gives certainty. You know where you stand, you know what's involved, you don't have a patchwork of requirements across the European Union. So that as well is a benefit for innovators.
Yeah. If I could give another follow-up question there, as you're talking about AI in the use of creating vaccines, what considerations were made, maybe if countries aside or large organizations aside, what if smaller, sinister organizations use of AI? Is there any consideration made there on how you regulate that? Or maybe the lone developer or something like that trying to make sinister technology. Is the oversight simply at commercial level, or is it at an individual level?
Exactly. Commercial and public.
Yeah,
Commercial and public.
Basically, once you place something on the market or put it into service, so that covers that internal company use, for example.
Mm.
But it is like any product, it's regulated at the point of market entry and the months leading up to it, of course, and everything that you need to do to be able to place it on the market. But we don't, for example, there is research isn't regulated here. Research, we don't define how you should govern or do research in universities. This is not what we're doing.
Yeah. And another area for we didn't mention this, the whole sandbox area for innovation. That was important too. And we had, like, there was another committee gave us advice on that, or gave an input to that, the sandboxes and developing them. And we have real world testing now under supervision is provided for as well in the final. That wasn't there at the beginning, so it's evolved quite a bit. That's the benefit of time. It's the benefit of lots of consultation since the original proposal.
I suppose we'll move on to one of the questions from Alan Coyne here as well. Speaking to some of my friends in the software development space, they have serious concerns with the EU AI Act being a hindrance to the potential development of tech within the EU. How do you foresee the impact of the Act on innovation within the EU, and especially in Ireland, where so many of the companies have their EU headquarters?
Yeah. I suppose we kind of touched on a bit of that originally. Yeah, I mean, we see like the single market, the benefit of the single market is really important and gives certainty. And the world is moving in this area anyway. And it's likely there'll be very similar requirements. So we would think that, it gives certainty to innovators that develop your product, you know where you're going. This is it, it's clear. It may be changed, tweaked from a delegated act. That would only be in terms of definition, really, but I would think, or defining ChatGPT as things evolve, as development evolves. But yeah, the certainty, the benefits of the single market, I think are.
I think it's also important to remember, like, just sort of what you can kind of do with legislation and what you can't do, and I think you can't really regulate for innovation. You can't. I think I looked the other day, and I mean the US and China are, of course, still far ahead on venture capital for it. And that's the name of the game here. It's you need compute and you need money to get it, and that's basically what drives the large scale developments we're seeing on LLMs. So doesn't all this is about is saying, oh, okay, we have 150 million uses of an app by a citizen. What is it's unregulated? We have to do something about it. But like you can't write down on a piece of paper that Europe should suddenly have a booming venture cap. That's something broader that has to be addressed by all the member states. That's something else.
Yeah, I think that's true. That was part of our discussion. That said was that really reflecting this question about innovation and stifling innovation. But it's bigger. This is a product safety regulation. That's what it is. It's not intended to say, like, if you're developing, these are the requirements, but go away and develop. And we're with you. And your sandboxes, we're with you in terms of an open-minded regulator that wants to engage. We're with you in all that, but that's not the lack of innovation or lack of investment by VC in Europe. Isn't because
and like
we have an AI Act now.
And like I think there's a lot, Mistral in France, for example, was obviously heavily involved and very vocal throughout the process of coming up to Christmas. But then, they were like the European champion, for example. They had a very promising model that has a lot of potential. And I mean, they've been acquired or entered into a partnership now with Microsoft because this is the business decision that they took. They said, okay, how do we scale up what we're doing? You go to where you can do it. And this is simply a business choice. So I don't think the AI Act actually has a whole lot, despite what it can often be said, regulation doesn't really stop innovation. It's not looking at the whole picture.
Let's say, for example, you're if I get it correctly, the allowed use copyrighted material within training data to create an AI model within the EU to be used within the EU. So what if you create those products within the USA and then you might only have a product within the USA that's only applicable there that we're, say, not allowed to use within the EU or just wouldn't be available here? Are there issues that come into play there, or am I just misunderstanding where we're at the minute?
Well, you don't have an extraterritorial application of the European Union law insofar as the product is not made there by a company based in Ireland, and it's not, or European Union, or it's not intended to be placed on the market there or put into service. So, like, of course, we don't have an extraterritorial. We very rarely have it's very, very difficult to enforce an extraterritorial application of a law to, say, Canada. It's not. It is often done. For example, dual use products. Dual use products are often, you just have an export ban, import ban. But yeah, okay. If you use, I mean, we have quite a robust, I would say, copyright legislation in the European Union, but you don't really have that in the States. So that's also a question for their jurisdiction. Yeah. But of course, if I understand well this question, this would be a deepfake. So it is covered by the transparency provisions in the AI Act. So you do have to disclose. You have a disclosure obligation that is synthetically generated, and then of course you also need to provide a meaningful summary of the training data that you used. So if you are, say, a Cillian Murphy, or you are one of these movie producers, you can enforce your rights in that sense, but you have to you do it outside the AI Act. You do it through copyright law.
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
It's a start. I do think this is as you see. We see it as well with the New York Times case against OpenAI. I mean, it's something it's not going to go anywhere, and these days it's definitely something that's going to be looked at. What's the best way to deal with it in the future?
We have two people to ask questions, Niall and Jamie. If either of you just want to jump on there.
Yeah, maybe I can go quickly. Hi, this is very much not my field. I hope you can hear me properly. I see her. Yeah. So just on this piece of legislation, is this part of a package that we can expect from the Commission? And so is this a piece of legislation that would come in conjunction with others in the, especially in the next mandate that we're, with the Parliament elections, etc. And is there any way that we can expect that these will affect, how we do business, especially in Ireland? So, like, really, is it also, I guess, can we expect that with the change in the mandate and with the change in the Commission, can we expect a change to the package? Really, not my area. So I'm just curious.
No, this is a standalone. There's no package
okay.
as such. Yeah. There's no package as such, other than, like, there's an AI approach in terms of, well, this, if you look at the whole thing, there's regulation, this in terms of funding and supporting it in innovation, yes. And then there's the AI office to trying to work and engage with developers, with providers, to try and to employ computer scientists and those who are working in the area, those who have knowledge of the area. So there's that kind of approach. We don't see any further legislative proposals at all. I mean, the thing is to work with this one now and get it right.
Potentially on maybe liability, yeah, because liability isn't addressed by the AI Act. And like, imagine you take something like a deepfake, right? And the potential, the technology that does deepfake is relatively benign. it depends how you use it. And you can imagine you can use it for something like intimate image abuse, for example. And you could foresee a scenario where that has a criminal liability in national laws or in European Union law. So that has to be, that's not for the, it's the wrong legal basis actually to do that in the AI Act. So things like that will 100% be discussed as the technology is uptaken by more people. But like you can't predict the next commission.
No, we can't predict the next commission. They don't have their work program yet.
No.
But there was a lot of discussion about what things Torlach touched on. You know, they're not necessarily illegal or harmful, but people should know about them. And then this is just a product safety. It's not about defining, like, say, hate speech shouldn't be there, but or deep fakes are harmful. Are they harmful? Depending, So that's not what this is about, really. It's just about, as we said all the time, it's a product safety piece of legislation. So I think the approach now is see how this one works and work with it and try and engage internationally as well, to G7, G20, the US as well.
Like there's lots of stuff you could there's going to be a huge concentration of market power around the companies capable of developing the systems, and then that becomes a competition question. So that would probably have to be looked at in some way, or even the governance and enforcement. The commission has taken on a lot of responsibilities, like with the DSA, the DMA, all centralized to the commission, and now this, as regards foundation models, centralized to the commission. So you could say, well, is there a logic to have some kind of a digital agency in the union? This could be proposed next term. You just don't know.
That kind of came up in the dialogue, so we had the discussions with the commission. Should we move to a digital agency? But then, you don't want to get away from actually the area as well. Say, you mentioned medicine or employment or those areas. So I think I think you could say we're finishing a European Parliament term now, mandate, new commissions coming in the autumn, that there's been a lot done in the whole digital area this term. Digital Services Act, Digital Markets Act, the Artificial Intelligence Act, there was lots.
Chips, semiconductors,
so
the cybersecurity, this too.
So need to, and that was one of the issues we had as a parliament. Like, it's one thing we seem to have a lot of legislation, not just in this area, yes, but in other areas as well. But it's about implementation as well, and how are they going to be implemented. So you can have all the regulations in the world and gathering dust on the shelves, but implementation is important. So I would think in the next parliament, whatever the committee is, that implementation, supervision of implementation, how these individual laws are being implemented in every member state, will be a serious focus, because we hear it so often, that in the whole single market area, that there's different approaches in different member states, and it's not uniform, and it leads to a lot of uncertainty, frustration, and lack of competitiveness as well, productivity issues as well. So there'll be a big focus on that. I know there will be, from discussions in the next mandate.
Thank you.
I might open to the floor one last time before I go, but I'll ask one last question myself. An awful lot of people here will be software developers by trade, not have much of politics or legislation background, of course. How would they get more engaged with that legislation, or with the bodies or with EU, the body that creates that legislation, or even keep informed at a more informal level?
I'd say start up with the AF. As I said, when there's a regulator appointed in Ireland, which their remit is not to be closed doors, but to be engaged and to help and to guide and to explain how. I think they'll be learning as well too. I think that's the area. Now, if the legislation was being formed, there's an opportunity always to engage with your own country or with the members of parliament, but we're past that stage now. But certainly the intention is that this will be open to, so that the commission and the regulator can learn about change and what's happening in the real world. But there are two to explain, so that there won't be, and to explain the intention behind it, to hold people's hands. I think that was important. Anything?
And write to your MEPs as well.
Write to your MEPs. Yeah, we don't. And just not on this issue. That is fine. I mean, those who really involved, bigger company knew of what we were doing, but we often find as an MEP that this thing took 3 years from proposal to get. Sometimes you don't hear from people until the last minute. Whereas if you'd heard from them at the beginning when the thing was proposed, we could have influenced and shaped it to there, as we did in terms of what I mentioned, the definition. Not to be to try and innovate, help innovation, sandboxes, real world testing, all those kind of things. We knew how important they were from the beginning, so we moved with that. Whereas if you leave it till the last minute, it's too late. So
very good. Appreciate the time. I might open the floor one last time. I know we're coming up on a great time to finish the meeting, but if there's any more questions from anyone here, now is the time to ask them.
well, we're always available anyway, just you have an email where you can come to contact, and we're happy to answer as best we can. And I would say anybody who thinks which it is an interesting area, the AIS, the artificial intelligence that's being established now, they have a call out for interest. So might be an interesting place to land for a while.
Yeah, absolutely.
As well, it is the real world, but you know what I mean. You gain a lot.
Yeah.
I think you've huge insights from working with the commission and getting so much. Well, lobbying is the word we use, but not lobbying, but interested parties submissions was really helpful for us, because politicians they know a lot about everything, know a little bit about lots of things, but they don't know a whole lot about any one individual. So with every file you get and work on, it's a big learning experience, and you learn a lot.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Torlach and Deirdre, and I suppose we'll finish up now.
Thank you very much for reaching out. Really appreciate it. It's good. And
Thank you.
thanks everybody for their attendance and for their interest.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.